Hey guys, this is DeltaUSA, and I'm going to respond to DemocraticSocialist01 or Social Democrat 01. He goes by DemocraticSocialist01 now, but anyway, he made this video about why multiculturalism is good. And he's doing a response to an individual, I think it's like SJW Gamer 101 or something like that. I don't know. I'm kind of bad with names. I didn't look at this guy's name totally. But I'm going to skip around in this video because he talks about the white Australian policy and some really irrelevant stuff that doesn't matter. But I'm going to play this beginning segment so you'll get my opinion. You'll get my opinion on, as I probably should have taken this part and done my own response. I'll probably do a response to this guy too, at some point in the future.
Going to find space in it to say this in a video itself, but I'd like video responses on what multiculturalism means to you. Whether you've never done a video or if you have a whole crop of them, I'd like to know what multiculturalism means to you and how it makes you feel.
Before I even get started, I'm going to respond to this one segment from this guy. I think multiculturalism, how it makes me feel terrible. Absolutely terrible. Especially with what's going on in the EU right now. It really makes me look at it and go, this idea is a failure. It's not going to work. And if you try implementing here in the US, you're going to have tons of backlash. Because of America's very unfriendliness with Islam, we haven't been totally hit with the Kool-Aid like Europeans have, where there's all this political correctness in the government where you can't question anything, otherwise you could be thrown in prison for hate speech. We still have freedom of speech to where it's not going to be received very well. And it's possible that National Socialist movements, even here in the States, could get big. They're already very weak. I know in Europe, fascist movements and third positionist movements in general are just getting bigger because of the nasty backlash from the migrant crisis, or the refugee crisis, whatever you call it. The backlash has been really bad for the left. It's caused a lot of damage. It's hurt their reputation, even weakened their influence within politics itself. There's been a big shift in the right wing, even though progressives, from my own view, from how I see it as, that progressives have unfortunately still made a lot of successful moves. The Supreme Court has decided to let fag marriage just be legalized completely. Even though and that's the problem. That's one problem I have here in America. That's one of our problems, that our Supreme Court has enough power that it can even overturn. It just trumps on states' rights. I believe that the states should have their own rights, but that's not the subject. I'll get into states' rights later, or in another video. Let's go.
Well, here's my response. I think multiculturalism is wonderful. It breaks down cultural barriers.
Sometimes cultural barriers can be a problem, but most times they're not. It just shows there's differences, and I can tell somebody like you wants to make all the cultures the same and just culturally enrich everybody and thinks it's such a great utopia to live in. Like it's, yeah, sure thing, dude. That's a bunch of crap.
Promotes cultural harmony.
Depends on the cultures. Like with Islamic culture and Hindu culture, or even Jewish culture, those two, Hindus and Jews, they fight with Islamists all the time. Well, mainly because it's I know for the Jews it's for territorial reasons, and there's other politics involved like territory, but religion does play a prominent role. These two cultures contradict, so there's huge fights over that. It's over race as well, just because it's the Jews and they don't like the Jews, and with the Hindus it's over religion. These cultures don't mix at all. This multiculturalism is more destructive to some cultures. Not with like Islam and any other culture mixing. It doesn't work. Since Islam literally means submission, it trumps over the other culture and takes it over and establishes its religion as the dominant religion and changes the culture dramatically. Christianity and Islam, they both are mainly Catholicism. Both of them have conquered lands and changed cultures. And both these two powers have fought in the Crusades, and neither side's won. Most of the Middle East, where Israel, Lebanon, and Syria are now, are still fairly Muslim because the Muslims won in that war, keeping that area under Muslim rule. Otherwise, those areas of the Middle East would be very Christian today, as they're not now because of the failure of the Crusades. These two giants have fought each other, and it's led to big bloody wars, and even like with the 30 Years' War. There's some cultural differences between the Europeans. A multicultural society in the EU would be a disaster. Not only are the European cultures different, but flooding Europe with a foreign culture is going to create tensions because of different morals, different beliefs. If you had a melting pot, okay, I still wouldn't like it too much. The reason I don't really like it is because Europe already has an established culture of social democrat. It already has one. America was a nation created by colonialism, and that's an undeniable fact. It was created by the British coming over into this land and setting up the 13 colonies, and aren't the colonies declaring independence because of taxation without representation. That's how it was created. So of course there's going to be white culture influencing the American culture significantly, but you have other cultures mixed in the U.S. as well. Major things like Asian, you have Black African because of the slave trade, you have the First Nation peoples like the indigenous, you have Latinos, you have all kinds of different cultures mixed into our own. And our culture is very unique because that's what the melting pot does. Let's continue.
Weakens the poison of cultural nationalism.
I don't get why white cultural nationalism is so evil. You try to make it seem like it's because we hate other cultures and we're just these xenophobic, chauvinistic racists who think all other cultures are inferior to people. It's no, we just want to protect and preserve our own culture. The Arabs can have their own culture and we have ours. Stop trying to mix the two together and trying to make them coexist in the same nations. It doesn't work. What's happened in Germany and Sweden, it's a nightmare. This isn't going to work. I don't get why you want to mix these cultures together. They're not the same. They're polar opposites. It doesn't work. If cultures are similar, okay, maybe you could do that. But this isn't the case. They're polar opposites. Deal with it.
And builds a great society.
Yeah, that's bullshit.
I also believe countries that embrace multiculturalism tend to have good relationships with other nations. Why? Because multicultural nations show that they respect the traditions and cultures of countries across the globe.
Like Sweden basically letting their women be raped by migrants. Like, that's totally good. I understand, yeah, rape is bad, and I understand the wars in the Middle East have contributed greatly to the crisis, but even before we went to Syria, this problem was here. Syria's always, not Syria, Sweden's had open borders for a long time, and look at how freaking messed up it's become. Especially with the refugee crisis. It's made the problem even worse than it already is. I mean, oh my god, dude. Multiculturalism is so wonderful that Sweden's been freaking trashed. Sweden's a freaking nightmare. It's horrible over there, man. It's so degenerate that being like a traditional, like you could say a fundamental like Lutheran, you could probably go to prison for hate speech. You can't even have really conservative beliefs over there because of all the people who hate conservatism and deem it as an evil force of oppression and evil. You can't even respect your own culture without being called a racist or whatever over there. It's insane. So my ass multiculturalism is wonderful. It's not working out. Especially not working out for Europe. I don't know for other parts of the world, but I know for Europe, it's freaking a nightmare.
I believe this fosters a good relationship with the outside world.
Well, maybe that's why Sweden doesn't go to war. It's because they're getting freaking destroyed from within, so they have no interest in war. They're not really getting involved in Middle Eastern wars. Oh, because they respect the culture. No, because they freaking have no interest over there. I know like the British and the French and things like that, they have greater interest in us in the United States. Our governments, along with Canada, have interests because of oil and other resources that we need to make money. There's all kinds of other geopolitics and reasons. Let's continue.
I consider countries that embrace multiculturalism to be great nations.
So,
and I am pleased that Australia has decided to go down this path.
Well, Australia is basically another nation that was created by colonialism, just like the U.S. and like New Zealand, Canada, and Rhodesia as well. So this really isn't a big deal. Really, I know for Australia, they're not flooding their nation with Muslim immigrants, so they're not. So when they set up multiculturalism, it's not going to have this nasty backlash like it is in Europe because they're not flooding their nation with Islamic migrants. They're just learning about other values. I don't think that's necessarily bad, but trying to mix these cultures into one nation, that's awful. It won't work because there's going to be all kinds of problems. I would say if you really wanted to do something like that, go with the melting pot. Since I'm an American, I believe that the melting pot has benefited the U.S. a lot. It's made a very unique culture and new values. We still have a lot of European values, but we have a lot of unique traditions that are from other cultures that America has. America's very unique. We created a very unique culture due to the melting pot. I believe that in that case, it's been very positive for the United States. I know for other countries, this would be a disaster. Their cultures would be ripped apart. But for nations like the U.S., Canada, and Chile, it's actually been very positive. Since these nations were created since they're not created by the First Nation peoples, and they were created by the Europeans, it differs greatly. And and since I'm a nationalist, I'm going to say I don't totally agree with what everything America's done. I think the whole thing, we could have treated the First Nation peoples better. But unfortunately, history has passed, so we can't change anything. My thing is, don't repeat that part of the past and look what we did wrong and learn from it so we can build a better nation. Not continue to trash it like what's going on in Europe. That's awful.
Of course, this was not always the case. In the first half of the 20th century, Australian school children were only exposed to one culture, British culture.
I know that was a norm back then, though, so it's not a big deal. And he goes into the white Australia policy, which I've heard of it. It's basically just they learn white culture. And he tries to act like learning white culture is evil and racist or whatever. It's dumb. And he tries to say like how people are ignorant and they're scared of other cultures. Well, mainly if you see what's going on with the Middle East, yeah, you're going to be scared shitless. Like, Americans want nothing to do with it. And yet we're being called these big evil racists because we don't want to flood our nation with migrants. But I know Obama's brought some refugees in, but luckily with a lot of, like, the Second Amendment and with a lot, just how Americans are, luckily we haven't had any major cases that I've heard of in the news, other than the whole thing with Texas and in California where people got killed by ISIS jihadists. No, Texas actually it failed. They got killed. I know in California there was a big shooting by ISIS over there in California. And freaking people like Obama are blaming the guns and they're not looking at what's wrong because they don't want to be called racist. We have cowards like this here in the States too. It's freaking bad. And I would understand, yeah, if we didn't go to war and we weren't so involved in the Middle East, we wouldn't have this freaking problem in the first place. I'm fully aware of that. People from talking to people like Manuel who are going to leave a comment like that. I'm like, I'm fully aware of this. I'm not dumb. I'm not ignorant to the issue. And that is a major reason why this is happening. But this huge immigration into Europe was happening even before that. So it's not just because of recently. Let's continue, though.
Says to me, nowadays, most Australian children, no matter their cultural background, are culturally enriched.
That's not necessarily good, especially not for Europeans. The Europeans are in a freaking very nasty position. They're in a very bad position right now, culturally. Economically, they're doing pretty bad, though, because the euro's falling apart and things like that. You have that problem, too. But mainly with culturally, Europe's in a terrible state. So cultural enrichment is not going to fix anything. It's going to make it worse. The best thing to do is to get rid of solve the problem by, one thing, freaking kill ISIS already so we can freaking move on. Maybe if we got rid of ISIS, that's one part of the problem. Two, after we kill ISIS, get out of the Middle East and only help our allies there. Only help our allies. Two, stop helping Saudi Arabia and Turkey because they're freaking not helping any. They're really helping us out. They're causing all kinds of freaking problems. I'd say get out and help I'd say help our allies over there like Israel and like allies that actually are anti-terrorist. And just stop funding Turkey and Saudi Arabia. And then ensure the Arab nations taking all the migrants because it's the others. They're Arabs. They're similar of culture. So I don't get why the Arab nations are doing nothing. The Saudis, it's really on their head too. It's not just the Europeans. It's not just the West's fault that this is mainly happening. It's the fault of like Turkey and Saudi Arabia for not mainly the Gulf states too. You can see the Jews. I know they're in a mode of like trying to preserve Jewish identity, and many leftists have cried racism. They'll do the same thing to white people. So they really don't like that fact, but it's happening anyway, so deal with it. But nevertheless, this whole thing of being culturally enriched mainly this is for the European speaking. This is not good. This is doing a lot of harm to Europe's indigenous culture, the culture of Europe itself. The culture of the white man is being really ripped apart. I know for America, we have enough common sense not to let millions of migrants in like Europe, and Europe's a lot closer. They're not going to set sail all the way to the U.S. It's just because Europe's so much closer to them, it's easier to get there. America's too far away, and I don't think they'll bother. But our problem is that we have the open borders down in the South. Which we could work on that a little bit. I'm not saying like completely cut off immigration, but just illegal immigration. Illegal is not a race. It is a status that's separate from a race. So don't call me racist for that, because that's not a race, you freaking moron. But anyway.
And what is better, they mostly learn about these cultures from their new friends.
Not necessarily bad. I don't mind learning about other cultures, but I want to preserve my own. I don't want to bring a foreign culture into here and have to have it be in the same nation as mine. It has, like, for China, it has its own culture over there. I don't mind studying another culture. That's fine. But trying to basically force these cultures to coexist in one country, that's not going to work. I already have a culture. I'm sorry. America's culture is really unique, so I really want to preserve it. because it's extremely unique and it's one of a kind. You don't see this kind of culture anywhere else in the world. You really don't. You may see something similar in Chile or Canada, but they're still unique themselves. Stop trying to frickin' mess everything up. Man, holy crap.
That is what makes multiculturalism so wonderful.
Well, to you that is. You're not in Europe, so you're not seeing what it's doing, so you have no idea what's going on over there because la la la, if I listen to that, that's racist. God, dude. I don't know what to do with it.
I remember being invited to celebrate Chinese New Year.
Okay, you talk about your multicultural experience here. I don't want to hear about it. I'm gonna get to the end of the video.
The answer was that he was fasting for Ramadan.
I heard about that when I was in 8th grade. Big deal.
I learned all this information from friends at school. That is the beauty of multiculturalism. Now, it would be wrong not to mention the indigenous people of Australia who have...
Yes, we do understand the indigenous people of Australia, the U.S., Canada, I think even Mexico. Well, Mexicans are indigenous, actually. They're a mix of, like, the white Europeans and the local, like, Aztecs and other big tribes like that. Even, like, the smaller tribal indigenous First Nationers. They were treated horribly by the Mexicans. I know here in the U.S. they were treated awful. Really bad. Canada was pretty bad, but nowhere as near as bad as America. And then the Europeans were pretty bad themselves before the United States was formed. So, yeah, that's just kind of history for you. But anyways, I'm going to cut it off here because it's really boring. He says, long live multiculturalism. Fuck off, dude. I really don't need multiculturalism in America. We already have the melting pot, so I think I'll pass. Anyways, this is DeltaUSA, your good old American nationalist, and I'll see you in the next video.